Hello again. I'm Brownfield Ag News anchor reporter Ken Anderson. And we're going to visit again today with Frank Chen. Frank is a journalist with the Asia Times media outlet, and he's based in Hong Kong. He's also a native of China. Frank, wanted to get some updated comments from you on the U.S. China trade war, the trade negotiations that have been going on. Also, wanted to ask you about African swine fever and what you're hearing over in your part of the world. You know, the talks between the U.S. and China a couple weeks ago seemed to be going along really well. And then all of a sudden, President Trump announced China was backtracking on its commitments, and that prompted him to follow through on his threat to increase tariffs. China reciprocated and increased tariffs on U.S. products. So the question is, who or what is to blame for these negotiations falling apart? What are you hearing?
Well, trade war, trade talks, how many times we have talked about this? So yeah, the process is really like a kind of anti-climax that before everyone was expecting that a trade deal could be made, that President Trump and President Xi could soon be toasting champagne to sign the deal to end the trade disputes. From my side, all the reports kind of suggested that Beijing all of a sudden got cold feet. It decided to backtrack on all its key promises, and that really made Trump to Beijing by his announcement of hiked additional trade tariffs on almost all Chinese exports to the U.S. So I think that probably it's because of Beijing's sudden decision, or even President Xi Jinping's his personal decision to go back to revoke all its promises, to backtrack on all its promises, probably because Beijing realized that it has promised too much that it could actually deliver. So, but some other observers believe that it is a kind of typical negotiating tactics used by Trump. Let's not forget that before Trump met North Korean leader Kim Jong-un in Singapore last year, he wrote a letter to Kim announcing that he has decided to scrap the deal before it could start. But later, the two leaders did meet in Singapore. So I think that sooner or later, President Xi and President Trump may meet and sign a deal to end the trade dispute for now or for a short period in the future. But since the negotiation is not that yet, not yet, so we have seen that it has entered a kind of talking and fighting mode, that the two sides may still have to engage each other to still trying to get the most out of the deal. But on the other side, they are not hesitant to slap more tariffs and other tit for tat retaliation. It's obvious that Beijing has some measures of its own, and some of these measures can really bite. For example, Beijing can stop buying U.S. agricultural products, its corns, its wheel, even its orange, its apple, and Beijing can also stop buying planes from Boeing. So, but the one recent development is a kind of poignant admission of the magnitude of the trade impact of the new tariffs. Is a TV commercial. It's a TV editorial aired by CCTV, China Central Television, which is a state broadcaster, in its primetime TV program, 新闻联播, aired in 7 p.m. each night about the major policy announcements and activities of the Chinese state leaders. And in this TV editorial, CCTV said that being a 5,000-year civilization, China has weathered through rain and shine and the ongoing protracted trade dispute. New tariffs are like a kind of a storm in a teacup. And CCTV insists that the setback, the rivalry between the two countries and the US-led containment of China broadly can never alter China's course to its great revival. Now, what is really interesting is that we are merely talking about the trade dispute. We are not talking about the two countries literally at war with each other, or we are talking about that a US invasion into the Chinese territory. So we are really talking about something trade, about the economy, but the CCTV and the Chinese propaganda department has still linked it to China's history, to China's course to its great revival. So it's a kind of a panicked admission that the impact is way bigger than Beijing may initially envisage it. That even though the economy has been doing well so far, but the impact is here to stay. So and also there's a quite funny news report that Beijing restaurants have decided to add 25% additional charge to US tourist diners since last Friday. And you have to show your passport to prove that you are not from the US but from other Western countries to have the to enjoy. But anyway, still, I think that some analysts, including the Asia Times Opta ED, pointed out that a trade deal too simple is actually not interest of either party. That the two countries really need to iron out all the technical issues or the disputes to settle down a more comprehensive and a deal that can be actually put into practice, a deal that China can actually honor. So, and given that the fact that Trump and Xi, they are both calculating men, and they have very complex relationship with their internal audiences, that Trump needs to secure another term, while Xi, although he doesn't need to face any election, he must not show any weakness in front of its domestic audience. So that is the core issue that Xi has to make sure that, and China still believes that US may have nowhere else to go to replace all the Chinese consumer goods, electronic products, handsets made in China. So I do think that the two countries may still find some common ground, may still sign a deal, but whether or not a deal can be signed is becoming less relevant, because it's really about nowadays about economic rivalry between the two countries. It's about tech rivalry. It's about the competition on almost all fronts between the two countries. China is rising rapidly, and the US is somehow panicked, or the US is somehow concerned about being eroded. And the US is really pulling all these stops to make sure that its global dominance won't be challenged, both economically and militarily. So I think that Trump's retaliation and Trump's hiked tariffs have come as a awakening call to Beijing that it can never use its own way to fool the US again. But on the other hand, Trump must have to realize that Beijing ultimately has an upper hand, because Trump may have to go, even if he secures another term, Trump has to go in 2024, but Xi is here to stay. He is the president for life in China. So Beijing can wait him out. 4 years is not too long. And let's not forget that China has a massive internal consumption market. China has more people than the US, 1.3 billion people. So it's a huge market that waiting to be further tapped. And Beijing has squillions and squillions of yuan to spurge on infrastructure, on external investment. And Beijing can always strike deals, FTA deals, or any other deals with Europe, with Japan, with other emerging economies under the Belt and Road Initiative. So somehow I have a kind of sinking feeling that Beijing can, on one hand, strike a deal with the Trump administration. And on the other hand, its real intent is to wait him out.
Let me ask you about the outbreak of swine fever in China's swine industry. It's been big news over here for several weeks, with lots of talk about how China will be or could be facing shortages of pork, and that the situation could last for several years. So I'm wondering if you've heard much about that, or if you have any thoughts on it. Is this the kind of thing that would cause any unrest among Chinese consumers?
Well, I think that it's a little bit exaggerated that the shortage, the pork shortage, and the ongoing swine fever epidemic can cause any chaos in the Chinese food market, because of course in China there are a lot of meat lovers, but generally speaking, Chinese people are not so carnivorous as their American peers, and the pork production has been somehow quite stable, because Hong Kong was hit over the past weekend by its first case of African swine flu, and the city has started the cull to kill its hogs. But China, given its slack public hygiene standard, given its the government mandate, probably these hog farms may not choose to report any case, or even if there is an outbreak, they may choose not to kill all these hogs or these pigs at all. Because anyway, let's not forget that the swine fever cannot be spread to human beings. It's humans are immune to this epidemic, so it can never be a public health crisis. So I think that provincial governments, local governments in China, especially in central meat industry, agriculture is a pillar industry, a cash cow to local governments. They may choose to play down the seriousness, the gravity of the issue, and continue to with some kind of a not so safe pork, but they are perfectly happy that as long as the disease won't spread among humans, then they are not concerned. And also Chinese people can find other substitutes like beef, like chicken, and it can also import some pork from overseas countries like India, like Pakistan, Southeast Asian nations. So I think that for now the impact is somehow still manageable, and also there are reports that the retail price of pork has increased since the beginning of the year, but probably one factor is because of the Lunar Chinese New Year in February. Everything, all the prices may go up during that 2-week-long holiday, and the prices may go down gradually, and it needs time. And so, and pork is not the kind of staple food among most of the Han Chinese. China also have some Muslim people, but it's still the minority ethnic group. So the Han Chinese, they do not eat so much pork, and they can always switch to beef, chicken, or other seafood.